The young and the restless spoilers shock. The city of Genoa was no stranger to scandal, betrayal, or whispered secrets echoing down the marble hallways of the Newman Ranch or through the sterile boardrooms of Newman Enterprises. But what was about to erupt would shake the very foundation of its power structure. For months, the enigmatic Y&R Dumas had embedded himself like a shadow beneath the gilded surface of Genoa City's elite, watching, waiting, and silently preparing for a strike that no one could anticipate, let alone stop. He wasn't just a businessman or a manipulative investor trying to seize control, he was something far more dangerous. He was a man with a mission. A man who had been wronged. A man armed with truths the world wasn't ready to hear. And now, the time for quiet observation was over. Inside the walls of a dimly lit control room tucked away from public view, equipped with surveillance feeds, encrypted drives, and a war map of Newman Enterprises, Aristotle sat like a modern-day puppeteer. His eyes scanned over the live footage of the Newman family gathered at society, sipping champagne, laughing nervously, oblivious to the bomb about to detonate at the heart of their legacy. He leaned back, expression unreadable, as he turned to his assistant and gave a simple command, "It's time. Send the results." The assistant nodded and executed the order. Within moments, every screen in society lit up. Cell phones buzzed. Laptops blinked. Victor's iPad, resting on the table next to his drink, vibrated with an alert that read, "Confidential DNA report, Victoria Newman." Jack Abbott, sipping from a glass of bourbon, casually opened the file on his phone. Across the room, Nikki Newman's hand trembled as she tapped her screen, already suspecting what was coming. Nick glanced up from his phone with a furrowed brow, while Victoria, elegantly poised in her usual executive perfection, read the file without flinching, at first. The silence that followed the collective reading was deafening. Victor's face morphed from confusion to fury in a matter of seconds. He slammed his fist on the table, his voice thundering across the room like an explosion. "What the hell is this? This is a lie." But even as he roared, his voice laced with denial, his instincts told him otherwise. Nikki's face crumbled. Tears welled in her eyes and spilled freely down her cheeks. She covered her mouth with trembling fingers, unable to utter a word. The truth had been spoken by the one thing Victor could never outmaneuver, science. Victoria's lips parted slightly. Her gaze shifted from her mother to Jack, then back again. There was a subtle shift in her expression, not of shock, but of betrayal. Something inside her had always questioned her place, the tension she felt with Victor, the unresolved emotions she carried. And now, as the truth stood exposed under harsh digital light, those buried doubts formed sharp edges that pierced her soul. Aristotle watched it all unfold with a predator's patience. This wasn't just about Victoria. This was about chaos. About disassembling the myth of the Newman dynasty one brutal revelation at a time. He had known for months. A confession overheard. A medical record obtained. A confidential test commissioned through a chain of intermediaries. The result had been irrefutable. Victoria was not Victor's biological daughter. She was Jack Abbott's. The implications were seismic. Victoria had been groomed to take over Newman Enterprises. She had made decisions under the shadow of Victor's approval and legacy. Now, everything was in question. Her authority. Her inheritance. Her identity. Jack sat frozen, the drink in his hand forgotten. He had once loved Nikki, truly, deeply. They had shared secret rendezvous, quiet moments stolen in the middle of chaos. He remembered the night vividly, the storm outside, the fire within. But he had never suspected that their passion had resulted in a child. That child had grown up believing she belonged to another man. Nikki finally found her voice. It was faint, broken. "I didn't know for sure. I suspected, but I was scared," she said, unable to look Victor in the eye. "I didn't want to destroy what we had. But it was too late. The damage had already been done." Victor turned toward her, expression thunderous. You kept this from me? You let me raise a child that wasn't mine and never said a word? His voice cracked, not just with anger, but with heartbreak. Victoria, ever the composed strategist, stood slowly. So this is what it feels like, she said. To have your whole life rewritten in a second. Her voice was cold, detached, a defense mechanism to keep the storm at bay. But her eyes betrayed her turmoil. Everything she'd ever done had been to earn Victor's respect, his love, his validation. And now, that foundation had been shattered. She turned to Jack. Is it true, she asked, her tone both accusing and desperate. Jack shook his head slowly, still reeling. I didn't know, Victoria. I swear to you. But if it's true, if you are my daughter, he couldn't finish the sentence. The weight of the moment was too great. Meanwhile, Aristotle issued new commands. Send the secondary files. Let them see the rest. Within seconds, more documents streamed into the family's devices, photos, logs, transcripts. Proof of Nikki and Jack's affair. Dates that matched Victoria's conception. A doctor's record noting inconsistencies in Victoria's blood type as a child. All neatly packaged. All irrefutable. Across town, journalists received the same data drop. News headlines updated in real time. Breaking, Victoria Newman's paternity questioned amid shocking DNA leak. Rumors spread like wildfire. Stockholders began calling emergency meetings. The financial markets reacted. Newman Enterprises shares plummeted by 4% in the first hour. Victor left the room without a word, his face a mask of devastation and rage. Nikki remained frozen in place, cradling her glass like a lifeline. Jack approached Victoria, hesitantly. I don't want to replace your father. But if this is true, I'm here for you. Victoria didn't respond. Her mind was spinning. Decades of memories were being rewritten in real time. She wasn't just dealing with a crisis, she was becoming someone new, someone unfamiliar, someone forged in betrayal and born again in the ashes of deception. And as the night dragged on, the once pristine reputation of the Newman family began to crack and fracture under the pressure of Aristotle's carefully orchestrated campaign. But the question that lingered wasn't just about Victoria's DNA. It was about Aristotle himself. Who was he to do this? What did he stand to gain? And why now? Whispers began to circle that he wasn't just a man with information. He was someone who had suffered at the hands of the Newmans. Perhaps a son left behind. A partner betrayed. A genius cast aside. Or maybe, just maybe, a man who had vowed long ago to bring down the empire brick by brick. But one thing was certain. The storm had only begun. Victoria staggered backward, the room spinning around her as the meaning of the DNA results settled over her like a thunderstorm that refused to pass. She brought her hands to her face, as if trying to block out the truth, as if the trembling in her fingertips could silence the words echoing in her head. The digital report had said it plainly, Jack Abbott, biological father. It was simple on the surface, but devastating at its core. She had spent her life fighting for recognition, for position, for the legacy that had been carved in Victor Newman's shadow. And now, with a single file, that legacy was disintegrating, leaving her breathless and betrayed. It wasn't just the shock of the revelation, it was how mercilessly fast it all came crashing down. One moment, she had been sipping champagne at a high-profile event, and the next, her entire identity was in question. It felt monstrous, cruel, surreal. And yet, even amidst the chaos of emotions tearing through her chest, a sliver of clarity cut through the fog. If this war was to be survived, she would need to stay composed. She lowered her hands and locked eyes with her mother, who stood as still as a statue, as pale as the marble floor beneath her. Say something, Victoria whispered, her voice hoarse and breaking. Please tell me this isn't true. Victor, too, was on the verge of losing all control. His knuckles were white as he gripped the table, veins bulging, eyes blazing with a fury only he could possess. "Answer her, Nikki," he barked. "What the hell have you done? Did you lie to me all these years?" Nikki finally opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. Her lips moved, but only a breath escaped. She seemed on the verge of collapse, paralyzed by the same question that haunted them all: was the DNA true? "I don't know," Nikki finally said, voice shaking. "I swear to you both. I never knew. I suspected once, a long time ago, but I was never certain. I kept quiet because I was afraid of what it might do to this family. But I didn't do this. I didn't plan this." Victoria stared at her mother in disbelief, the pain raw in her eyes. "You lived with that suspicion for decades and never told me? Never even thought I deserved to know?" Nikki's response was barely a whisper. "I was protecting you." Victor slammed his fist on the table again, causing the glasses to tremble. "You protected no one. You built our entire family on a lie." His voice was cracking with more than anger, it was pain, disappointment, a shattering of the ego he had built his empire on. "And now this lunatic Aristotle, he thinks he can destroy me with this?" Victor looked around as if daring the air to respond. That was when it happened. A sharp beep came from the ceiling speakers. Then the room was filled with a chillingly calm, almost amused voice. "Oh, Victor. You always were so good at shouting at ghosts. But this time, the ghost is shouting back." The voice of Aristotle Dumas echoed from hidden speakers, his tone dripping with malice and mockery. "Do you know what I find most delicious about this moment? You, the great Victor Newman. So easily undone not by a competitor, not by a boardroom betrayal, but by your own blood, or lack thereof." Everyone froze. Victoria turned slowly, her eyes narrowing, scanning for the source. Aristotle continued, his voice now spreading through every corner of society. "You built your kingdom on control, on fear, on secrets. But you never considered that one of those secrets might not be yours to keep. Nikki, my compliments, truly. You wore your mask better than I expected. But the past, my dear, never forgets." Nikki's hand flew to her mouth again. It wasn't just the words, it was the venom in them. The calculated precision. Aristotle knew. He knew more than any outsider should. And now, he wasn't just exposing the truth, he was twisting the knife. Victor shouted up at the ceiling, his voice ragged. "You coward! Hiding behind wires and speakers? Come down here and face me." Aristotle chuckled. "I don't need to stand beside you to see you unravel, Victor. I'm watching the walls of your empire collapse from the comfort of my control room. And I assure you, it's glorious." Victoria's breath came faster. She looked back at Nikki, her voice flat. "We need to verify this. Not with digital files. Not with Aristotle's games. I want blood tests. A full panel. At the hospital. And I want Jack there." Nikki nodded immediately, her face still stained with tears. Yes, we'll do that. We have to." Victor growled. "No one tells me what's true or false except the science. I'll call Dr. Cavett. Right now." But even as he pulled out his phone, the room remained silent save for the echo of Aristotle's laugh fading into static. As the connection cut out, Victoria realized something else: Aristotle wasn't bluffing. He had known about this for some time. He had waited. Prepared. And chosen this moment specifically. Why? Because it wasn't just about pain. It was about dismantling power. Victor's greatest strength had always been his legacy. And now, with a few well-timed revelations, that legacy was bleeding from within. But what disturbed Victoria more than anything was how calm Aristotle had sounded. As if this was only the beginning. She looked to Nick, who had stayed quiet through most of the scene, his expression unreadable. You believe it? She asked him. Nick shrugged, jaw clenched. I don't know what to believe anymore. He handed her his phone, where the DNA results glared back at her from the screen. But if there's even a 1% chance it's true, we can't ignore it. Jack entered the room again, slower this time, and approached with caution. I just got the message, he said. I've already called a lab. They're on standby. Victoria nodded, her voice steady now, forged in fire. Then we do this. No more whispers. No more secrets. No more lies. But even as she tried to steady herself, the sinking feeling in her gut wouldn't go away. Aristotle had struck a nerve, but what else was he hiding? What other secrets had he uncovered? What else had her mother kept hidden to protect them? And if this truth had remained buried for decades, what other rot had been sealed behind polished doors and golden walls? As the Newman family began their descent into a new era of doubt, testing, and exposure, Aristotle leaned back in his control chair, watching the live feed of their unraveling. You think the DNA was the climax, he muttered to himself with a wicked grin. Oh no. That was just the prelude. In the hushed luxury of a private train car weaving through the sun-drenched hills of southern France, the clinking of crystal flutes and the rustle of fine linen napkins barely masked the undercurrent of unease traveling with its elite passengers. Nick sat casually, legs crossed, peering out the panoramic windows as the lavender fields blurred past like a painting in motion. Next to him, Sharon maintained a delicate smile, her words light and deliberate, almost forced, as she mused aloud about how absolutely wonderful everything felt, the scenery, the quiet elegance, the company. Yet beneath her soft-spoken appreciation lay tension coiled tightly in her chest. She was trying, genuinely trying, to embrace the moment, but recent trauma had left her shaken, and her instincts whispered that paradise, this time, might be weaponized. Victor, ever the hawk-eyed patriarch, narrowed his eyes toward Sharon's pleasantries. He didn't question her sincerity, he questioned the setting. The opulence of the train car, the curated ambience, the mysterious host. Everything was too perfect, too pristine, as if designed for seduction rather than comfort. When Sharon spoke, Victor's response was not kindness, but curiosity edged with suspicion. He watched her carefully, measuring her words not by their content but by what they avoided. Then, his gaze shifted to Nikki, who had just picked up a bottle of champagne from the polished bar and was admiring the intricate label. It's a vintage I've never seen, Nikki said, her voice laced with amused sarcasm. Leave it to Victor to drink the entire bottle before the first course. I suppose you'll be ready to fight the entire French army by dessert. Her smile tried to bring levity, but the underlying current of anxiety wasn't lost on Sharon, or Victor himself. Sharon looked toward Nikki and said with sincere warmth, "Thank you again, for letting me come on the jet. I know I wasn't exactly on the original guest list." Nikki shrugged with a graceful nod, seating herself beside her husband. Aristotle insisted, she replied. He said the gathering wouldn't be complete without you. That was when Sharon noticed the envelope on the table, resting beside the silverware like an afterthought. She reached for it slowly, the paper crisp and unassuming. Inside was a formal welcome note, embossed with dark ink and classical flair. Her eyes scanned the lines until Victor's gruff voice interrupted the silence. "This guy," Victor muttered, glaring at the signature at the bottom of the note. "Who the hell does he think he is?" The question lingered in the air like a curse. No one answered it, because no one truly knew. Nikki leaned toward her husband, her expression darkening. "Do you think it's safe to eat?" she whispered. "To drink?" Victor grunted. "I doubt he'd go through all this effort just to offer us a nice brunch. This has the smell of a setup." The mention of poison wasn't just paranoia, it was grounded in a recent and personal horror. Sharon stiffened, her mind immediately transported back to the incident, the sickness, the helplessness of being violated from within. Her hand, which had hovered near the flute of champagne, withdrew instantly. She blinked, struggling to maintain composure. I think I'll pass on the champagne. And the caviar, she said softly. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but everyone heard. Nick, already mid-bite, raised an eyebrow at her. Really? He asked. You were just saying how wonderful everything was. Sharon gave a faint, pained smile. It is. It's just hard to trust appearances lately. Nick poured himself another drink, more out of defiance than thirst. Come on, he said, trying to play off the tension. You think Dumas is going to poison us after flying us across the Atlantic and pampering us like royalty? He chuckled, but no one laughed with him. The guy probably made a fortune out of thin air. He's not going to risk it all just for some dramatic flair. But even as he spoke, Sharon's mind was unraveling the layers of unease. Why had Aristotle brought them all here? Why now? What was the real purpose behind this lavish gathering aboard a private train in a foreign land? The man had always been enigmatic, but lately his moves had gone from eccentric to disturbingly theatrical. Poison. Secrets. DNA revelations. It all felt too deliberate. Victor leaned back, swirling the champagne in his glass but not drinking it. His eyes didn't leave the walls, as if he expected them to start whispering secrets. Everything Dumas does is calculated, he said at last. Every glass, every train, every invitation. And trust me, if he wanted us here, it's not because he enjoys our company. Nikki nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the champagne flute in front of her. The bubbles rising inside felt like a metaphor, calm on the outside, violent underneath. We're not guests, she said softly. We're players. And he's already set the board.